October 22nd, 2018 Village Board meeting. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Dewar. Do I have a second?
Second.
And second by Mr. Grenier. Any additions, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. At this point, we allow 15 minutes for anyone to speak on anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Do we have anybody that would wish to do so? Hearing none, okay, we can move on. What I would like to do is to suggest changing setting of the order of the meeting. I'd like to take the consent agenda and number 15 and move those up to the front before we go back to the regular agenda.
So moved.
Thank you very much, sir. And do I have a second?
Second.
And second by Mr. Toll. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So I'll start with, actually, we have the correspondence, but I would like to start tonight with an ordinance designating the building located at 415 East Prospect Avenue as a Lake Bluff Historic Landmark.
Just read the titles, right? Just read the titles.
Yes, okay. And I'm going to call everybody up to do that. There'll be an ordinance designating the building located at 400 Ravine Avenue as a Lake Bluff Historic Landmark. An ordinance designating the building at 419 East Prospect. Okay. I would like to, though, give a little just why these have been chosen, or why these are historic landmarks. The property at 415 is associated with the Camp Meeting Association and was noted by the 1998 Architectural Survey as a fine example of French eclectic architecture owing to its irregular shape, cylindrical entrance tower, and half timbering. The designation of 400 and Ravine is part of the original 1836 Close homestead. The Close were the first settlers here in 1836. The structure is associated with both William F. Cochran, former village president. He was village president during World War I, and the Lake Bluff Camp Meeting Association, among others. An ordinance designating the building located at 419 East Prospect as the Lake Bluff Historic Monument. Okay,
So, I'm confused about what we're doing.
I'm sorry.
So,
What did I go out of order
You
here?
took 15, and you only need items 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 for the consent.
Okay, I'm confused now.
I had thought the point of the consent agenda was that we didn't have to plow through all the paperwork.
Right,
that
and we're not.
We don't have a motion to break something out, that we just vote on all of them.
All of those, okay, well, yeah, I agree with you there, but we're going to be giving these plaques out.
Okay.
And what I wanted to do was clarify why people are getting, why these buildings are getting the
Okay.
plaques.
I'm not confused anymore.
It's okay, because I got confused, but that's the reason, I'm not reading the whole thing, I'm just explaining why they
Okay.
are getting that. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Is it appropriate now to say that I work for the architect who is,
No.
no, okay, thank you. I will do that
We're
when it is
having certainly
appropriate.
an interesting evening. We're having an interesting
So,
evening.
Now I'm
yeah,
getting
it's just
confused.
it's just the consent agenda, which includes items 10, 11, 12,
Right.
13, and 14.
Okay.
I'll
And-
move
Yeah.
that we approve the
Prove that, would
consent
you accept that?
agenda.
Yeah, that would make
Second.
that easier. Okay, and then I'm just pulling these out to explain why these are getting the recognition that they are getting. And by the way, this is the first and only time that we have ever had 3 houses or 3 homes at one time being designated to do that. And for that, myself, I'm very pleased.
So you have a
And I
first and a
hope we have
second.
more. Pardon?
So you have a first and your second, so you can call.
Do I have, okay. And do I have all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to call up the folks here as we have these plaques. If I,
Yeah, they took
Is 419 East Prospect a separate item outside of the consent?
That is correct.
We have not approved that
Approve
one.
that one, yes, that's correct. Okay, so let me get to the first two, and then we'll approve that, okay? Thank you for that correction. I appreciate that.
So it's 415 East Prospect Avenue, the owners of 415 East Prospect.
Yes, do we have the owners?
You do.
of 415
Mrs. Caldwell's here, yeah.
East Prospect. Folks, hi, thank you very much. Thank you. You live on a wonderful street. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you brought something to carry this home for you.
That is for certain.
Okay? All right, we hope that you do put that on the house.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. What?
Oh. Pictures, doesn't it? Thank you. Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Great, thank you.
We have 400 Ravine. Hi, Nan. Thank you. You got a great house.
Thank you.
There you go, and there's that. And I know you'll put that on your house.
Yes, I
Got it?
Goodness.
Thank you very much. Do I have to smile? Okay. Okay, now I need a motion for an item number 15, since I'm up here, which is designating at 419 East Prospect Avenue. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved, and then I need a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Toll. Thank you. All in favor?
May I
roll
recuse
call,
myself
please.
because I work for the architect?
Right, understand.
Yes, so then I would.
Very symbolic. I know. Okay. All right. Okay,
Kathy, do you want me to give you the 419 so you can read that one?
yes, please. Would you hand me that?
Yep.
Thank you, sir. 419,
Yes.
that property, used as a basis of nomination, notes the properties association with notable figures, including the Close family, which I did mention was the first family of this community, the Camp Meeting Association, Reverend Edward W. Jeffries and Abner Scranton, who were two of the founding Methodist ministers who helped found the Lake Bluff Camp Meeting Association and spent several years developing that here. The petition also noted that a possibility that the bricks in the structure are originally from the Close Brickyard, which was located near where East Blodgett is now, as well as various distinguishing architectural features. Do we have someone here for 419? Well, all right, you just came right in time. Okay. That's all right. Come on up. Okay, we want to thank you.
You may have somebody else who wants to comment on this.
Who wants to comment?
I don't know.
I will. Thank you very, very much for that. And again, here we go.
That's right.
Thank you. We need to vote on that. We need to vote.
Right.
Did you have fun? Yes. Okay.
Well, you still, we haven't voted on it yet?
We haven't voted yet. Oh, I'm sorry.
Andy was supposed to see if there's any-
Did anyone say they wanted to comment on this?
I don't think she had to do that.
Are there any comments?
Just don't vote.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, we will go back to the regular agenda. Barbara?
Nay.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. All right. What did I do with the,
6A.
no, I know, we've got 6A, which is the warrant report. Where is the,
You got it right here.
okay, so the warrant, all right. At this point, we'll go back to regular agenda. We have the village finance report, warrant report for November 1 through 15, 2018, and November 2018 payroll. All righty, do we have, thank you. The expenditures of village funds for payment of invoices in the amount of $307,409.32 for November 1 through 15. Expenditures of village funds for payroll in the amount of $271,303.83 for October 2018. Total expenditures, $578,713.15. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, so moved by Mr. Stewart. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Pardon?
Second.
Oh, second, by
Meyer.
Mr. Meyer. Thank you, sir, very much. All right, and does anyone have any questions for our finance director? All right, hearing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Inkerman?
Aye.
Trustee Dewar?
Aye.
Trustee Grenier?
Aye.
Trustee Lemieux?
Aye.
Trustee Meyer?
Aye.
Trustee Toll?
Aye.
All right, we now have the village administrator's report.
I have no report this evening.
Village attorney's report.
I have no report this evening.
Village president's report. Yes, I do have a report. All right, a couple of things. Two weeks ago, we being the village, received an unsolicited proposal from the city of Lake Forest to take over all fire services for the village of Lake Bluff. Though the board and administration are always looking for economic efficiencies, we do not feel that this proposed takeover of our volunteer fire department by Lake Forest is in the best interests of our citizens and our community. So, unless there's any disagreement from the board, I would like to direct the village administrator to draft a letter to the city of Lake Forest from the village of Lake Bluff, stating that we have no interest in their proposal and we wish to continue with the services as we have currently and have had since 1897 with the Lake Bluff Fire Department. Am I hearing any disagreement? Well, then I will direct that you two please do so for that. I would also like to tell everybody that since October, with the demise of the Rockland Fire Department, 20 Knollwood firefighters, EMS, and paramedics have joined the Lake Bluff Fire Department, putting our enrollment or membership at over 60 members. We are very, very proud to have and happy to have the Knollwood firefighters with their expertise and fires join our already very, very fine department, which I think will make us an even more stellar department in the years to come. One of the things that has happened in a restructuring with recommendations from the leadership of our fire department is that we now have 3 paid on-premise firefighters in our firehouse every day, Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, and 24/7 on the weekends, supplemented at all times by those 60 volunteer firefighters. Again, we are very honored and happy to have the continuing service of the Lake Bluff Fire Department for many years to come. And speaking of that, last Friday, we used our fire department's venue to be able to put on a well-honored community event, which is, we do every year, which was Veterans Day, which because of the inclement weather, we did hold in the firehouse, where there were over 400 people there in attendance, and students and members. So our fire department has been a wonderful asset to our community. It is part of our culture. It is part of our traditions. And that ends the president's report for tonight. Okay. We've already done the consent agenda. We are now under number 13. An ordinance amending.
16.
What, 16? I thought we did 13. Hold it, why are we doing 16? I can't hear you.
The others were.
Oh, the consent agenda.
Yeah,
Damn it. Sorry. A resolution estimating the amount of the annual aggregate 2018 property tax levy. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Dewart. Annually, the village is statutorily required to estimate the funds to be raised from taxes on real property in the village prior to the adoption of the levy. This is an estimate and does not limit the board's ability to levy a different amount, providing it is in compliance with the truth in taxation law and all applicable notice and hearing provisions. Finance committees at their September 20th meeting reviewed the 2000 levy projections and unanimously recommended approval of an aggregate property tax levy of $4,323,323 and $227. Oops, $4,323,227, or 2.45 more than the 2017 property tax extension. The village share of the property tax levy is $3,379,110. Subsequent to the Finance Committee meeting, the Library Board elected to request a levy of $964,117, a $20,000 increase from initial estimates. The change increases the overall levy to $4,343,227, or 2.931%. However, still less than the maximum amount under the PTEL. The levy is comprised of new construction equalized assessed evaluation estimated at $2.1 million based on recent county estimates and a CPI factor of 2.1. The total EAV is projected to increase by 5% to $602 million. This estimated levy is in compliance with the amount allowed under the Property Tax Limitation Act. The first reading of the 2000 tax levy ordinance and the public hearing will be held on Monday, November 26. Did I do a first and a second?
You do, yes, you've got it.
Questions and things for the finance director regarding this proposed levy? Okay. I noticed that the library director is here. Does the library director have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I'm
No.
here with Kathy Meyerhouse, who's the
Okay.
library board president.
Okay, thank you.
I do have some questions, and if Eric, you and Kathy could join us at the lectern. Hi. As chair of the Finance Committee, can you, and representing the board, can you give us a little more information on the rather sizable increase, at least relatively speaking, for your proposed increase for this year?
Are you addressing that to either one of us, or?
However you would prefer to
Go ahead.
respond.
Well, As listed in the letter, which I hope found its way into your packets for this evening, the biggest reason ties into the library's reserves, particularly following the roof project this past year. Library had reserves of about $540,000. 282,000 of that is going to the replacement of the roof, which was a bit more than we had initially expected or hoped that it would be before we went out and started getting actual bids. That did take our fund reserve down to $243,000. That's about 27% of our operating budget. The library board, in terms of being fiscally responsible, is committed to keeping 25% of the operating budget as funds in reserve in case of emergency replacements that are needed to cover expenses at the beginning of the fiscal year before property tax funds, which make up 95% of our revenue, start arriving. The catch there is that in another 10-15 years, at minimum, we will be looking at another major project, the replacement of the HVAC system, which is scheduled for that time. Last time we had that replaced, back in 2006, that was another $300,000 project. So in terms of wanting to be fiscally responsible, we don't want to find the library in 10-15 years' time without sufficient funds to cover that next big capital expense. And in addition to having the reserves drawn way down this fiscal year, we have some additional expenses that are coming up. Parking lot that needs to be replaced, a lot of electronics that need to be replaced, some furnishings that are getting pretty wobbly. So we have some other expenses that are going to be drawing operating expenses and potentially even some of the reserve funds down over the next year or two as well, making it a challenge to make available the $20,000 or $30,000 that we want to make available to start putting into rebuilding that reserve.
Also, if I might point out that when we prepared our budget for this year, we knew that the roof had to be replaced. So we were planning on that. We had $100,000 set into the budget from reserves to take care of the new roof. We came here to the Architectural Review Board and we talked about the materials, and we got great counsel and a wonderful meeting. And this was like end of July, we got approval to move ahead. And we put it out for proposal, and our first proposal, we ended up re-preparing and sending out again because our bids were very limited because we had combined the masonry and the roofing test. So in hopes of being able to split it into two different specialties, we were hoping that the bids may come in a little lower, which would help us out. So we had a rather lengthy proposal time and then did choose the bid that we are going with. So that was into about September. So it was about that time that we learned the gravity of the damage to the roof. And actually we had contingencies set in, which would have been upwards of $300,000. And fortunately, so far, we're not using any of those contingencies. So that's good news. So it wasn't that we were blindsided by this or ill-prepared. It was just the cost was just significant and unavoidable. So
there were a lot more complicated elements to the roof project than we initially realized. Masonry work and other things that needed more attention than expected and added exciting new twists to the project.
Yeah. So I guess at least on the surface, you've got a sizable number of things that are in queue. You mentioned the shelving, the furniture, parking lot. I saw on the website today that you have an RFP out for a new website, which is going to be consequential as well. Clearly, those all, I'm going to guess, significantly exceed $20,000, the $20,000 increase that you're contemplating for next year?
Well, actually, the increase that we are proposing will go directly into a contingency fund to help set off our reserves. So that money's not going to be spent. That money is going to be set aside. We calculated it would take 11 years for us to recover what we're spending on this
Okay.
roof. So that's just a bit of a buffer there. Our budget and our planning should be able to let us do some, not all of our projects.
Yeah.
And the website actually was pretty much in the budget anyway. So fortunately, everything else is kind of fitting in. We've always been very, very cautious with the budget and done our preparation well.
For everything else for the projects that are listed, we're committed to doing those with the existing operating
Okay.
budget and the PTEL increase. The increase beyond the PTEL is exclusively to be earmarked for reserve funds, $20,000 for, to go specifically to the special reserve fund for the future capital, expected capital projects, and plan on doing that each subsequent year to build up the reserve.
So this would be something you would do on a repeated basis?
No.
Oh.
This would be a one-time $20,000 over the PTEL, and then back, our expectation is to be back within the PTEL rate next year.
Okay,
But the, that $20,000 that we would be ahead would still be within the levy rate that we would be applying the PTEL to next year. So we would anticipate just continuing to put that when we did our budget for the year, just continue to budget that for going into the special reserve fund at the end of the year. Did I answer the question?
yeah,
a little closer.
I'm somewhere along the line here.
Okay.
Between, so you would expect to only exceed the PTEL in the coming year?
Yes.
Okay, and this would not be a continuing process?
No.
But it would
no
take-
expectation of that. I mean, it's always possible that fate could throw us a curveball, but I don't see any sign that we would be
Okay.
doing that.
Yeah, and if you look at the history of the library and our levy, it's been consistently within the PTEL. I mean, we've
Yeah, I understand that. At the same time, I guess I'm in the back of my mind, I was reacting to Eric's comment that it would take 11 years to regenerate,
No, that was actually my
regenerate.
comment.
Oh,
My
yours, I'm
comment is
sorry.
without
Regenerate
any-
the reserves, and to bring you back up. While you're at 25%, you're exceeding your target, but you're contemplating some other significant things down the road that would need to. So it almost seems like you've got operating reserves and a capital, and kind of a capital sinking fund or capital reserve that you're setting aside. It's like you've got an extra pocket here in your trousers that you're sort of putting money away in.
I don't know about the
I don't know
metaphor.
about the trousers.
Yeah.
You know, it's,
But we've got the general reserve that we're committed to having 25%
Sure.
of operating funds
sure,
in.
and yeah, we
And-
understand that, I
Yeah,
think.
and
yeah.
then we're setting up the special reserve fund to
For
collect.
capital projects.
Yeah, for capital
Okay.
projects, expected capital projects that we know we're gonna need to be taking a look at.
Okay.
We know from the folks that maintain our facilities, who keep us up to speed, thankfully, on the expected lifespan of things, that we're gonna need to take a look at those. And
Okay.
we want to put ourselves in a position to be able to start rebuilding the reserve now, when we can do that in a manageable fashion, as opposed to trying to 4 or 5 years out, come up with $300,000,
Yeah,
which would be a lot more dramatic.
okay, all right. Do you have any questions or comments?
Well, so it will be one reserve or two reserves?
Right now, we have just the general reserve, but we will be taking a look at setting up a special reserve for the sake of transparency.
Right, and then
So
every
that
year
will
would,
be very carefully delineated
Mhm.
and separate from the general reserve, so that money will be held separate.
You're calling it it's a capital reserve is what it
Yeah.
is.
Right.
As to an operating reserve.
Yes.
So if I were to look at it next year, it would be about the 25% of your operating budget would be consistent, and the other reserve for future capital would be at 20, 40, 60, 80 then, because every year you contribute an additional 20, is that right?
Yeah, that is our
That is
plan.
our
Yeah,
goal.
because
Yeah.
Yes.
your PTEL formula is based on the new base that you've set by,
Yes.
Yeah.
by raising by 20. So yes, that 20 then goes in every year after that. Were you reserving for capital ever before? Or
We
what's
have
changed?
We have been reserving for capital. I don't know that there's been a lot that's changed. I think that the biggest thing that we've run into is just having, this is one of a variety of capital expenses that we've had in recent
Right.
years, which is,
Well, our building is
rather
Well, I was
aged.
gonna say, how old
rather
is
than
the
being able to
building?
put
I mean,
money
we-
into reserve as we were
1975.
4 or
Yeah.
5 years ago, we've kind of been fluctuating up and down around 550,000 the last few years,
Right,
and then
right.
had the big capital project this year that really drew that down.
But I'm not being critical, I'm just trying to, sort of, for the transparency, so people understand. I mean, the building is 1975, and I would assume that means that capital expenses are gonna be higher now than they were
Yes.
20 years. Do you have, so you have this plan, how far out are you looking in terms of what the building might need?
Well, we also have, we've been looking into renovations and improvements in the building, which
Right.
exceed our ability to pay for ourselves, so.
Yeah, right. That'd be a
hopefully-
different
Hopefully
project.
fundraising would help us out there, but if it doesn't, the library has to be prepared to take
Right.
on issues as they come. And, I mean, they're substantial, and so we're setting up,
Yeah.
well, had we not had to pay $283,000 for a roof, we still would have been in a much better position to take care of the needs that we have.
Yeah.
This is just an extraordinary expense.
Right.
And in my experience with the library board, it's always a bit of a balancing act with the reserves. We made a real emphasis back around 2007, 2008, of really trying to build those back up after we had a series of capital projects, most notably the aforementioned HVAC system. But then we did end up in a situation where they were starting to edge upward, and we had as a group, wanted to be certain that they did not get too high, aware that a situation where we ended up with 7,500% of operating funds in reserve would not be a desirable circumstance
Yeah.
either. And, as that discussion got going, then we started getting an increasing number of projects that drew on that fund, which at the time seemed like, problems answering each other. We had expenses, they were drawing on the reserve that we didn't want to get too high, but then we ended up with the very big expense of the roof, which drew the reserve way down.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping I got an answer to your question in there somewhere.
Thank you.
I think the idea that surfaced here, that you have a separate capital reserve is good, because obviously, if your target is a 25% operating budget and you've been running it at 50, prior to the roof, it looks to a taxpayer like you're overtaxing for your requirements. So I would
Yeah, and that's not good
second the
transparency.
idea that's kind of surfaced over here, the other end of the table, that you do break it out.
Yeah, and a lot of that money had been set aside for projects
Understood.
that, for example, one of the things that had been budgeted long-term was replacing the shelving both upstairs and downstairs, which is, I've learned everything in libraries is incredibly expensive. So we have not replaced although we've replaced with signage on the first floor, but we replaced all the shelving in the children's area, which necessitated some floor work and recarpeting. And we've done the children's community room with the help of the garden club. So we've put a lot of those excess reserves, brought that down, putting improvements in the building rather than waiting to do them all at one time. So that's been an ongoing project. This is just the the extraordinary one.
Understood.
President O'Hara, I'd like to suggest that we go ahead and pass this resolution this evening. What I'd also like to do is invite the library board, or certainly the two of you, to join us at our Finance Committee meeting on the 29th. And let's talk in a little more depth and make sure we're all have a really clear understanding of where you're going and whatnot, because it looks like you've got some sizable things to face up in the next couple, 3 years. And I think it's probably, for the sake of transparency, certainly, and understanding by the two boards, village board and library board, that we understand where we're going and how we're going to apportion it. I think the notion of setting aside funding for capital, that pesky HVAC system, I know that those of us who are in the library side of the building, or the museum side of the building on a regular basis, are affected by the pesky HVAC system too. So pretty well involved with that. So what I'd like to do is that I understand that we would probably have to go ahead and into the first reading as is. But hopefully we can come to a real clear and better understanding of this, and if there's any need to update the ordinance for the second reading, that we could do that. So that's what I would propose to you on the board.
One comment on that: I assume that with that invitation, we would have to notice the library board for the Open Meetings Act for our Finance Committee. Or I asked the question, I don't know the answer.
It not necessarily, depends on how many members showed up.
Okay.
Majority of a quorum would trigger that. If not, if just the president of the board and the executive director, that would not require.
Okay.
But we can work with that
Yeah,
either
I mean,
way.
it sounded like the invitation was for everybody, so I just wanted to raise the issue.
Yeah.
And if there's any thought that there might be majority of a quorum, certainly it can be noticed, even if people do not show up. and
Yeah.
You don't have it in the end.
Just like we did with the PCZBA this evening, we didn't know we'd be
Correct.
fortunate to have everybody here.
Yep.
So,
Very good.
All right, so what we will do is, we will vote on this for first reading.
resolution, so
It is, right.
it's just an estimate, so it's just, yeah. So you have a first and a second.
Right, okay, and then you'll have a more in-depth discussion at the Finance Committee on the 29th. All right, okay, so we have an acceptance of this resolution.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've had a first and second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We now have a resolution approving the purchase of rock salt for the purpose of snow and ice removal from Morton Salt Incorporated. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Meyer, thank you, and a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Toll. The village's FY 2018-19 budget includes $38,008 for the purchase of rock salt for ice and snow control operations. Annually, the State of Illinois Office of Procurement conducts a joint bid for roadway maintenance agencies statewide. This year's approved bid of $69.33 per ton was awarded to Cargill in Salt Division. This year's price reflects a 48% increase in price per ton. At this price, the village will be able to purchase approximately 700 tons of rock salt, totaling $48,531, exceeding the budgeted amount by $10,523. The village must commit to purchase 100% of the order, and the supplier commits to providing 120% of the ordered amount at the bid price if severe weather conditions arise. Last year's price per ton was $46.61, with the village's salt usage totaling 630 tons due to an average winter. The village currently has 375 tons left from last season. With the purchase of 700 more tons of salt, the village will be able to adequately cover the winter season. This year's increase in price can be attributed to the fact that the portions of the United States experienced harsher winters, depleting supplies and increasing demand in these areas. Do we have any questions for our Public Works Director? Would there be a possibility that we would actually run out of salt? I mean, it would have to be a very severe
There's
winter.
always a possibility. I mean, we've never exceeded 1,000 tons in a season.
Right.
So I always base my world of salt on 1,000 tons. With the ability to go 20% over of what we purchase, we
We
sit
should be
pretty, yeah,
fine.
we sit fine.
Yeah, it's a 48% increase.
So you kind of think you're going to end up about where you are now next
Right.
year? But you're pretty full right now, right?
We're pretty, yeah, we're full. I mean, we got as much in that barn that barn can handle. The salt prices you see is like, it went up, it jumped dramatically this year. It hasn't been this high since 2015. Salt prices kind of go all over the board from year to year. I based the budgeting on going up 3% from the year before. Well, the commodity, the market changed so rapidly that it jumped up 48% on me,
Can you hedge salt?
Not that I'm aware of.
You should try that.
You
Maybe
can
it's
write a
business.
contract for anything if somebody wants to do it.
Okay, right, like pork bellies. All right, any other questions regarding rock salt? Roll call, please.
Trustee Dewart.
Aye.
Trustee Grenier.
Aye.
Trustee Lemieux.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Toll.
Aye.
Trustee Ankman.
Aye.
Item number 18, which is a resolution approving a license agreement for a portion of the village right-of-way at 420 Evanston Avenue. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
So moved, that was Mr. Toll, Mr.
Lemieux.
Mr. Lemieux, and a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grenier. 2016 and 2017, Capital Customs Homes built a new house at 420 Evanston Avenue owned by Grace 90 LLC, which remains on the market. The owner is requesting through their realtor, Jeff Ohm, permission to construct a 4-foot open-style Gothic wooden fence in the public right-of-way on the side which fronts along Ravine Avenue. This fence is intended to create the appearance of a more private backyard to help sell the property. As shown on the attached as-built grading plan, the north property is 20 feet from the side of the porch and 22 feet from the back corner of the house. There is an additional 20 foot of village-owned parkway from this property line to the edge of the street pavement. There is a tree on the property line that would make it difficult to put a fence right on the line. In the attached letter, Jeff Ohm is requesting to place a fence 8 to 10 feet into the village right-of-way as shown on the plan. The attached draft resolution has been written to allow the fence 8 feet into the village right-of-way. This will leave 12 feet of grass between the fence and the edge of the street pavement. The attached resolution also requires the property owner to maintain the tree, since the village will not have convenient access behind the fence, and it requires the property owner to move the fence temporarily in the event the village needs to do utility work in the right-of-way. Comments, questions?
I just have a question, imagining what it's going to look like with the corner of the two streets, and then there's a sidewalk on Evanston. There's not one on Ravine. And so the fence would be just on the other side of the sidewalk. So there's grass, there's sidewalk, and then immediately would start that little picket fence on Evanston, correct?
Kind of sounds
Looks offset more than that. It almost looks like a side yard and not a fenced-in
Yes,
front
sir.
yard.
Joe, you want to, and you are? I'm Jeff. Hi, Jeff, thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
You know, I apologize, I did not bring something to show on the overhead, but actually, that's not quite right. So
Okay.
where the Parkway, if you're going down Evanston, then you'd have the Parkway, then you'd have the sidewalk. The actual fence sits well beyond the house. It's actually at the back portion of the porch. We're just talking about the setback off of Ravine, if that makes sense.
The red is the
So,
fence.
so off
yeah.
of Ravine, it's technically the right-of-way, and it's 20 feet in, and that 20 feet hits a large, I think it might be an oak tree. So, and it just wouldn't leave, it would leave literally like about an 8-foot side yard. So we had asked for an additional 8-foot closer to Ravine, which then puts the fence on the outside of that large tree, and then we would run that back to the driveway. And then it would create a much nicer, we've had the home, we've had wonderful response to the house, been on the market for about a year and a half. We've dropped the price about $150,000, and the biggest response we always get is there's just no backyard. So we worked with a couple designers and working with Pearson Fence, and their recommendation was to do a Gothic-style picket. So originally, we looked at doing a 6-foot, but there was some concern being a corner that might, create some restrictions in terms of sight lines around the corner. So then it was suggested just to do a 4-foot Gothic open-style picket, and then that would kind of keep it down, but still create somewhat of a sense of a yard for people with kids and dogs and things like that.
You've got two trees. There's an older, very substantial tree, and then there's a newly planted tree toward the front of the property. And so the fence at the rear, at the large tree, will go,
It'll actually, the fence would be on the outside of the tree, closer to the street. That's the one we're trying to avoid, because that is, like you say, a very large tree.
okay. And the little tree that's recently planted, will that be inside or outside the perimeter of the fence?
That will actually, it should be inside the perimeter of the
That should
fence.
be inside the perimeter of the fence. Okay. And that's a village tree that would have been
Those are
planted?
all on the private
Part of
property.
the landscape
Yeah.
plan, I think that the
Well,
building.
it's part of your lands, ours or theirs?
I thought it was.
It was my understanding that it was, I'm the marketing guy, I didn't actually build it, but that was my understanding as part of our landscape.
Oh,
plan,
okay.
The building put
Okay.
in.
Yeah, I was just concerned.
When
that-
there's no sidewalk, it gets very difficult to tell what,
It's a little fuzzy.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
right-of-way varies depending on the street you're
Okay.
on, so.
Yeah.
So how far off does this put the fence from Ravine itself? Is it about eight feet off?
Like 12 feet.
12 feet,
So
okay.
we put in, there was a little vague, we were looking for 10 feet. It was suggested by Mike Croak that maybe we do 8-foot relief, if you will. So that would be 12 feet off the road.
Okay, thank you.
I was initially a little concerned about this, but as I looked it over and going one street north at Sylvan, there's a rather substantial hedge that is about, relatively speaking, in about the same place compared to the house and the street, which essentially takes the same place as the fence.
There
Yeah.
actually is quite a few when you go around town. For example, when I
Yeah.
was first looking at fences, we looked at what would be the northwest corner of, I believe, Moffett and Center. And there, actually, they have a 6-foot with a beautiful arbor, it would be the northwest corner, and it's like a 6-foot, but with an arbor. But Mike explained that because that side yard on Moffett, there's actually it's 2 side yards, if that makes sense, like 2 side yards back to back, then the 6-foot isn't an issue there.
Yeah,
And that's
no,
why- And on Ravine,
Yeah.
technically, there are a couple of homes behind us, closer to the park, a little bit
Sure.
of what would be west.
Mhm.
So that's where I think the concern was, maybe if we brought it down to 4-foot, it wouldn't create any visual
Yeah.
obstacles.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of precedence or
Sure.
stylistic compatibility. If you go one street north, there's a very substantial hedge that's, golly, 6 feet plus tall and about at least 2 feet thick. And it's sort of a proxy for the same functional kind of a thing.
And
I was a little wound up as well, but then I realized we approved one on Sunrise, in the last handful of months.
Prospect
We're
and
very,
Sunrise,
or
yeah.
for, that was Sunrise.
Well, the thing is, the corner of
Sunrise and
Prospect and
Prospect, yeah.
Sunrise, yeah.
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
done that periodically
And,
Yeah.
through the
you
years.
know,
Yeah.
that seemed logical, so I kind of came to
Yeah.
grips with this.
Yeah, I did too.
Would the owner realize, though, that that is still village property? And if something came up where we had to access that, utilize it, reclaim it, whatever, that,
And I think that was my understanding from a legal point of view, that was the point of the license, that we would have to do that. And plus, when we sold it, we'll of course have to disclose that to a future buyer too. So we understand that. It's,
okay.
I think those risks are relatively minor if and when that happens, to remove a, whatever, 10-foot section of the fence and pull it out, why, say they put in a new sewer or something. I don't think it's that big of a deal, then it gets reinstalled.
Okay.
I
I
just,
guess the one thing I would ask, if you're inclined to consider this, if it makes a difference to you from the 8 to 10 foot, because, I mean, our preference would be 10 foot. If that gives you guys some concern, certainly we're okay with the 8. It's just obviously the extra little bit inside the yard for future homeowners, that much nicer. Nobody's gonna use the space outside of the fence, of course, and because it is lower and there's no visual restriction, but, you know, that's certainly for you guys to decide.
well, when you walk down toward Artesian Park, is there sidewalk on either side? I don't think that there is.
There's not.
And so if I were walking my dog, or I'm a kid dragging my baseball bat and a bag and all that stuff, I mean, that is hopefully where the kids are gonna be going and not in the street. So even though there's not a sidewalk to, you know, guide the traffic, we want to be sure that there's enough of a space that, you know, all the kids who are going to their baseball games and playing at the park, that, and I would think that that's a reasonable amount of space then for kids to, you know, 3 of them on bikes or whatever they're doing.
They're in the road. They're in the road, or they're just north on East Prospect. I mean, that's the way it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I candidly have never seen, everybody goes down the street there because there's literally only 3 houses on both sides. So I've seen everything what you're talking about because we've had the property for several years
Yeah.
with kids and, you know, skateboards and bikes, and they all go down the middle of the street, but
Oh, my
just because there's
goodness.
no traffic.
Okay.
And if we determine that we want to put in a sidewalk or change it with 45 days, we can terminate the agreement and the fence would be removed.
Mm-hmm.
This hasn't gone through any other board?
The license agreements like this have not. They have not historically, and this is one of those where the property owner came to the village. There are multiple situations out in the village where there's fences or other improvements in the right-of-way that do not have a license agreement. What we've been doing is, as either they've come in to replace a fence or do some other, we at that time bring it to you all and say, hey, let's get this cleared up and have the proper license agreements. But we haven't been gone out and surveyed the whole community and say, let's go get license agreements from everybody, but just kind of doing them one-off as they come in for either replace the fence, as I said, or if there's something else that may call our attention to it. They're going to get, say, a new irrigation system in the right-of-way or so forth.
I guess I just wanted to bring up the whole idea of the sidewalk issue because, I mean, that was kind of my thought or my concern. And maybe we need to say, should there be some kind of a sidewalk there? Just because, I mean, that's the place that all the kids come and go. And maybe there's not a lot of traffic, but I've driven there because I live way on the other side of town. If I want to go to the park, I drive, and there obviously are cars there. There's a parking lot. I don't know where that fits in the scheme of sidewalk improvements that maybe should be considered. It's just something that I think is
No.
important to be proactive if that's something that we should be considering.
The villages in the comprehensive land use plan of the village, there's a transportation section that deals with exactly what you're talking about, where future sidewalks can go to close gaps if there's like a pathway to either to a park or to a school or some other well-traveled route by pedestrian or bicycle. And I don't recall if this particular short street has that identified in any kind of a critical area that's something that's imminently planned. I don't remember that being one of those areas. You know, there's other places, East Sheridan places, those other like kind of classic
Yeah.
safe routes to school routes.
Yeah, yeah.
This is not on that. And
Right.
because there are sidewalks just to the north and just to the south, there's other routes there.
It really looks like a dead end.
It is.
Looking at Google, it doesn't look like much of a traffic area.
No, it's not.
Just the residents there generally.
Yep.
Cut into the park there, but most kids go down to Prospect.
Yeah.
Because you can cut through right there, but they usually end up going up a block.
It's kind of a bumpy ride, I've been told, on
Yeah.
a bike.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, clarifications? All right.
So are we voting on a 8-foot relief or a 10-foot relief?
That would be the question that's up there. What do you all want to do? You want to keep it at the 8, or?
I'd be inclined to give whatever is most appropriate to clear the tree, and not much more. So whatever we can do to maintain that as a public way, if that means an 8 feet of relief, then that's what I would be in favor of.
Okay, anyone else?
I'm okay with it.
Okay with the 8?
You're okay with what?
Eight.
With the 8?
8.
8 feet clears the tree?
8 feet clears the tree.
8 feet.
All right.
Okay with that? Okay, then we'll do it with the 8 feet. All righty, and this is a resolution, so we have just an aye on that one, we'll just have.
Yeah, you just need, simple roll call.
simple,
I'm sorry. Want a roll call?
This is a roll call?
Roll call?
Okay.
Oh, okay,
Let's do it.
all right. Roll call.
Trustee Grenier?
Should
Aye.
say so on there.
Trustee Lemieux?
Aye.
Trustee Meyer?
Aye.
Trustee Toll?
Aye.
Trustee Anchorman? Aye. Trustee Dewart?
Aye.
Okay, we have ordinance number 19, which is a repeal, an ordinance repealing ordinance number 99.9-30, 2005-18, and 2016-29, and amending Title V, Chapter 4 of the Lake Bluff Municipal Code to create new procedures to designate certain vehicles as authorized emergency vehicles. Okay. The village maintains a volunteer fire department, staffing to provide, before I do that, I'd like to get a motion on that one, please.
So moved.
So
Second.
moved, and second.
Second.
Thank you
Mr. Dewart,
very
Mr.
much.
Meyer.
The village maintains volunteer fire department staffing to provide fire protection and other related services to areas within and around the corporate limits of Lake Bluff. Since the village's fire department officers respond to fire and EMS calls with their private vehicles, the village has designated pursuant to the Illinois Vehicle Code 625 ILCS 5-1-100, the private vehicles operated by the fire chief, the deputy chief, and assistant chiefs as emergency vehicles. When the village fire department officers have changed their personal vehicles, the village board has updated the list of emergency vehicles via ordinance. In an effort to adopt a more efficient procedure, the village board directed staff at the 10/2/2018 meeting to modify the ordinance to provide an administrative process to designate authorized emergency vehicles. The attached ordinances accomplish this goal. It provides a board notification process and includes police department vehicles in the definition of authorized emergency vehicles, which has been necessary from time to time. Any comments or questions?
If I may, just to clarify, this ordinance was modified to address the concerns and the desire to make it administrative at the last meeting. And one thing I wanted to point out is that the title changed and this ordinance changed, and because it is a code amendment, talking with village attorney in the spirit of belts and braces, you can consider this ordinance for first reading and consider waiving second reading tonight, just to clarify this. The action requested noted a voice vote, and that's because going down that path is that this would reappear unless you wanted to go ahead and waive second reading for this procedure. So just wanted to call that out.
We could waive second reading.
If you so, you could not do it and just take it up at the next meeting. This is the second time you've seen this, and this is
Right.
based off, but because it was different enough,
It has
again,
to do
belts
that.
and braces, just to be sure, not that there was a concern about somebody raising an issue with it, but.
Are we interested in waiving second reading for the point of efficiencies? All right, so then we'll do this first and then do it on, then do the second reading piece part, right? Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You, all righty. Those in favor, do I have a
You need a
motion?
motion?
I need a motion, right, I know.
I'll move that we waive second reading.
I'll second.
Oh, well, okay, we'll do that very quickly. Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay.
We need a roll call for second?
Hang on.
Yeah, I think you need a roll call on that waiving second
Roll
reading.
call for second. We went a little too fast. Okay, roll call.
All right, here we go. Trustee Lemieux?
Aye.
Trustee Meyer?
Aye.
Trustee Toll?
Aye.
Trustee Anchorman? Aye. Trustee Dewart?
Aye.
Trustee Grenier?
Aye.
Okay, all right, trustees report. Do we have a trustees report this evening?
Are you looking at me like you want an update for
On
the parking committee?
On the
Okay.
parking,
Okay,
please.
sure. So we had a very productive parking ad hoc committee meeting the other night. All of the members were present and representing several different groups, including the residents by the beach, residents not by the beach, the yacht club. Who else? We have a resident. Church was actually not represented, other than me, since I do attend the community church at the beach church. And we talked about background. We talked about goals. And we even talked about some ideas that we have directed Drew and his staff to pursue a bit more, and hopefully to discuss at least one more meeting and bring something to this board. But made very good progress, and I'm quite certain we'll have something in place, whether it's do nothing or do it all by next beach season.
Okay, anything else? Are you meeting again? When are you
We will be meeting again. It was a challenge to get everybody's available for the
I'm
first
sure.
one, so hoping sometime in December.
So
Okay.
you're characterizing it as there was pretty good ability to get consensus on ideas? Because I was kind of curious to see how this was going to.
I would say consensus, at least to explore ideas. There's definitely been there's some debate for sure, and what we have decided to pursue at this point, the majority we're in favor of, the majority of the committee, though with some concerns, especially one member. So those concerns will be addressed at the next meeting, and we may have to start over if those concerns are enough for us to say it's not going to work. So, but we've got a good group, lots of interest. Of course, we're not going to make everybody perfectly happy, and if we did, we probably weren't doing our job. So, but progress.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you for
for doing
chairing
that,
this
yeah.
Of course,
committee.
my pleasure.
Okay. Any other of the trustees, everybody? All right, I'm going to need a motion here now to go into executive session to discuss threatened litigation pursuant to Section 2C11 of the Open Meetings Act.
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
A second by, I think it was Ms. Anchorman, I think that way. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, we're gonna
Roll
roll call.
roll call.
Oh,
Roll call.
Trustee Meyer?
Aye.
Trustee Toll?
All right.
Trustee Ankerman?
Aye.
Trustee Dewart?
Aye.
Trustee Grenier?
Aye.
Trustee Lemieux?
Aye.